Adam Crichton, when it comes to this horrendous economic mess we're in, is very much the hope of the side. Scholar though he is, and an outstanding one at that, and young, he has set his face against the strategies, or would you call it guesswork, to address this so-called pandemic, though how 44 people in the country who are serious from the virus, the bulk of them elderly, and 99%, according to the World Health Organization, classified as mild, how that constitutes a pandemic, I have no idea. There are 232 deaths in Australia. That is 0.0009% of the population. I repeat, 0, and then add 3 noughts and 9 of the population. Adam Crichton has drawn attention to an interview on this channel, on the channel's Business Weekend, by Alberto Calderon, the chief executive of the explosive manufacturer Orica. He too has questioned the government's strategy in stopping the coronavirus and has warned against the costs of blanket lockdowns and damaging, his words, obsession with COVID-19 deaths over those from other causes. And he made the simple point that the mental and health costs of trying to eliminate the virus from Australia, including, quote, months and months of lockdown, will be enormous. He said, and I made this point last night, quote, there seems to be an obsession with COVID deaths, but nobody is talking about the rest of the excess deaths. Are we trying to do the New Zealand thing, going for 0 and locking Australia down until there's a vaccine, if there ever is one? He said if that is the case, it hasn't been articulated. Mr Calderon made the very valid point that Victoria in April had 400 excess deaths. That's 400 more than the usual number for the month, and of course far more than the number ascribed to coronavirus, 232. Now, as you know, under the lockdown provisions, many people who wanted health care couldn't get it. They've died. But in the last 24 hours, we've had more money being dished out. A $1,500 COVID disaster payment. As I said to Peter, another $14 billion to the $289 billion already spent by the federal government on keeping the economy afloat. And don't you love the fact that you're told it's coming from the federal government? Another untruth. Governments have no money of their own other than what they take from us. And now they're borrowing. But we're never consulted. And of course, now as the government puts Victoria into further coma, the ACTU and the Business Council are saying we need, quote, a new temporary paid leave entitlement so that working people won't lose wages. Well, how much longer can this go on? Adam Crichton's a breath of fresh air. Adam, welcome again to the program as we have him every Wednesday night. What do you make of this, Adam?
Good evening, Alan. Well, firstly, look, a real tribute to the CEO of Orica. I mean, it's fantastic that he's spoken out on the record. I know for a fact so many CEOs and former CEOs, they agree with that, but they won't say this sort of thing on the record. We need more people to do so. But look, just on your point about the $14 billion, the cost to the rest of the country, it's so true. And it's just a reminder that the incentives here are just so perverse. So Victoria takes a particular action and the costs really rest on the rest of the country in large extent. And this, of course, is a reflection of the micro situation with the politicians themselves, with the Victorian government, the ministers, the public servants. This doesn't cost them a cent, really, but there are just massive, massive costs for the rest of society, of course, especially in Victoria, of course.
Yeah, of course, Adam, there's no mandate for this. There's no parliamentary debate. Federal Parliament doesn't sit. There's no debate about it. These people who pretend to know everything, just deliver these edicts and lectures every day.
Of course, and it's so sad that so few journalists have actually asked the government in Victoria, what is the cost-benefit analysis here? You know, show us the data, show us the evidence from overseas where these lockdowns work. And I can tell you, as you probably already well know, that there is no certain evidence that these lockdowns work. It is very obvious for looking around the world that is the case. And yet it's just extraordinary that the decision is taken with such massive costs without any justification.
Yeah.
And sadly, so many people go along with it.
Yeah, to continue on the program of response which has already failed. Now, if I was coaching a rugby team and they came in at half-time and there'd been conspicuous failure over the strategy I had applied in the first half, I'd either change the strategy or lose my job. Now, you've done an interesting piece today that elderly Australians are expressing more concern over the economy than our citizens in New Zealand, the US and China.
Look, this was just absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
Absolutely fantastic and fascinating, I thought, actually. It was sad in one sense because it showed that young people are far more concerned about the virus from the perspective of their own health, even than the over 75s, which for me is just a reminder of the level of misinformation and massive confusion in society about this. And yeah, let's be frank, the perverse role of the media, which has just scared the daylights out of people, leading to all sorts of terrible consequences. And also, on the other hand, it was a reminder of the wisdom of elderly Australians that they realise that actually they aren't all kind of massively under threat. That's been massively overhyped. But the long-term concerns for the economy are actually far more of a consideration.
Let me ask you this.
It was a very enlightening.
Yeah, let me ask you this. In that McKinsey survey, the 25 to 44s were extremely concerned about their health rather than the economy. 25 to 44.
That's right.
Do you think we're inculcating a culture into young people that really our destiny isn't our responsibility? At the end of the day, put your hand out, the government will look after us somewhere along the line. We have developed this dependent mentality rather than independent, haven't we?
Well, look, that's certainly true. And look, in the short run, about 900,000 young people are being paid far more now than they were before the coronavirus emerged through the JobKeeper payment. But the reality is by March next year, the vast bulk of those payments are going to go away and hundreds of thousands of young people will lose their job permanently. And graduates who are graduating, say 25, 26-year-olds, they're going to really struggle to get a job. And not just struggle to get a job, but even if they do get one when they're 28, 29, their incomes are going to be so much lower for many, many years. And it does surprise me that they aren't far more angry about what is happening.
I agree.
The idea that we can just flick everything on back next March and everything goes back to normal, I think is completely ridiculous.
Absolutely. Just one thing before I change the subject here. Have you had a piece of paper? I haven't had one. What options were canvassed for controlling the virus spread, if that's what they're worried about? What options were canvassed which wouldn't do damage to the economy? What were the options available to them? Are we told?
Well, look, you'd think, 50 years ago we put a man on the moon. You'd think that we'd have a more targeted way to deal with this virus in terms of restricting its entrance into aged care homes than taking a massive sledgehammer to the entire economy for months on end. And, let's be clear, it's not just this 6 weeks. We've already had 6 weeks earlier in the year. It's at least 12 weeks now, a quarter of a year, basically, the sledgehammer has been taken. So, look, I don't know what options there were. Certainly other countries have taken different choices. I think Sweden will be seen to have made the right decisions. The virus has petered out there, fizzled out completely. There's no second lockdown and they're moving on. That's certainly not the case here.
Yeah, I just wonder, and we all know, is the fear is out of all proportion to the risk.